My fiancée dumped me out of nowhere, said she needed to find herself. I said okay, take all the time you need. A week later, she found herself, sitting across from me, watching me on a date with someone who never needed to leave. I used to believe that love had a sound, not a metaphorical one, an actual sound. For me, it was the faint rustle of her hair when the wind caught it, the way her laughter dissolved into quiet breaths, or the distant hum of the city outside her apartment window while we lay in the dark, talking about everything and nothing. That was what love sounded like, and when it stopped, when the sound disappeared, I realized how unbearable silence could be. Pause for a second, like, share, and subscribe so you can join us for the full adventure. It was late autumn when she told me she needed to find herself. The air had just started to cool, the city glowing under pale amber streetlights, and we were sitting at a small cafe a few blocks from her apartment, the same one where we'd had our first date 2 years earlier. She'd chosen the corner table, the one near the window, where you could watch people hurry past with coffee cups and scarves and heavy coats. She looked tired that evening, though she tried to smile, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. She held her mug with both hands, like she was afraid of letting go. "I don't know how to explain it," she said, voice soft but steady. "It's like I've been living someone else's life, like I woke up one day and realized I don't even know who I am anymore." I remember thinking that she was joking at first. She had a way of saying things so earnestly, you never quite knew if she was teasing you or not. But then her eyes lifted, and I saw it. The distance, that invisible wall that forms between two people when one has already started to walk away. "What are you saying?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "You want space?" She nodded. "I think I need time to figure out what I want, who I am, what this is." Her fingers brushed the ring on her hand, the one I'd given her only 3 months earlier. I remember the reflection of it glinting in the dim cafe light, a small, perfect circle that suddenly felt absurdly fragile. I told her I understood, because that's what you say when someone you love is slipping away and you're too afraid to hold on too tightly. You pretend you're strong enough to let them go. "Take all the time you need," I said. She smiled then, grateful maybe, or relieved. I couldn't tell. She reached across the table and touched my hand once, briefly, like a goodbye disguised as affection. Then she stood up and left, and just like that, the sound of love was gone. For the first few days, I didn't tell anyone. Not my friends, not my family. I kept the news folded somewhere in the back of my mind, like a page I wasn't ready to read. I still expected her to text, to call, to say she missed me. But the days stretched out quietly. The apartment felt wrong without her. Her toothbrush still leaned beside mine. Her books were still stacked on the nightstand, and every time I opened the fridge, I half expected to see her favorite oat milk staring back at me. I kept things exactly how she'd left them, as if doing so might somehow pull her back. By the 5th day, I'd memorized every sound the apartment made. The groan of the radiator, the faint whir of traffic outside, the hum of the refrigerator. All of them filled the space where her voice used to be. Then came Saturday. My friend Lucas convinced me to go out. "You're rotting in that apartment," he said over the phone. "Come on, man. Just one night. No strings, no expectations. Just be alive for a few hours." I didn't want to, but I went anyway. We ended up at this new rooftop bar downtown, the kind of place that tried too hard to look effortless. Exposed brick, low lighting, a skyline view. The music was soft enough that people could still talk over it. I sat at the bar, nursing a drink I didn't really want, while Lucas tried chatting up a group of girls near the railing. That's when I saw her. Not her, not my fiancée, but someone else. She was sitting 2 seats away, alone, scrolling through her phone. She had the same calm expression I'd once loved on my ex, like the world couldn't touch her. There was something unforced about her presence, something that didn't demand attention but held it anyway. Her name was Claire. We started talking because the bartender mixed up our drinks. She laughed about it, a real laugh, not the polite kind people give strangers. There was warmth in it. "Guess fate's got a weird sense of humor," she said. "Or the bartender just doesn't care," I replied, and she smiled. We talked for hours, about work, music, childhood stories that didn't seem to matter, but somehow did. She was open, direct, honest. things that suddenly felt foreign after weeks of uncertainty. When she spoke, she looked at me like she was there, present, not thinking about what came next. I don't remember who suggested leaving first, but we ended up walking along the river, the city lights flickering on the water. The air was cold enough to see our breath. She told me she loved the way cities look at night, how you can't tell if people in those high-rise windows are lonely or content. When we reached the bridge, she leaned against the railing, looked out over the lead, dark water, and said quietly, "Sometimes I think people leave not because they don't love anymore, but because they're scared of how much they do." I didn't know why, but those words hit me. We exchanged numbers before we parted ways. I didn't expect to see her again, but the next morning she texted, "Coffee later?" That simple message felt like oxygen. I didn't hesitate. We met again, once, then twice, then 3 times that week. Each time, something inside me thawed a little. She was light where my fiancé had been shadow, clarity where there'd been confusion. And for the first time since that night in the cafe, I stopped checking my phone for her name. A week after the breakup, I agreed to go on an actual date with Claire. Dinner, then maybe a walk through the park. I told myself it wasn't serious, that it was just 2 people enjoying each other's company. But deep down, I knew I wanted more. I chose a quiet restaurant downtown. Candlelight, white tablecloths, soft jazz, the kind of place where conversation feels like confession. When I saw Claire walk in, every head seemed to turn just slightly. She wore a navy dress that brushed just above her knees, her hair pulled back, simple and elegant. She smiled when she saw me, and the air seemed to shift. "You look," I started, then stopped, suddenly self-conscious. "Beautiful." "Thank you," she said softly, sitting across from me. The conversation flowed easily, laughter slipping between sips of wine and stolen glances. She asked about my family, my job, my favorite places to escape when the city felt too loud. I asked about hers, and she told me she grew up in a small coastal town, moved here for work, still missed the smell of the ocean. At one point, she reached across the table and brushed a speck of lint off my sleeve. It was such a small gesture, but it felt intimate, grounding. Then, near the end of dinner, I looked past her shoulder and felt my chest tighten. She was there, my ex-fiancée, sitting at a table across the room, facing me. Her expression was unreadable, calm, almost cold. But her eyes were burning. For a moment, I thought I was imagining her, but when she tilted her head slightly, I knew it was real. She didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. Claire followed my gaze and turned slightly. "Do you know her?" I swallowed. "Yeah," I said quietly. "That's my ex." Claire blinked, then nodded slowly, understanding enough not to press. "Do you want to leave?" I shook my head. "No, it's fine." But it wasn't. For the rest of the evening, I could feel her watching. Not constantly, but enough. Like her gaze had weight. Every time I laughed, every time Claire touched my hand, I could feel the tension tightening somewhere behind me. When the check came, I hesitated before glancing back again. The table was empty. She was gone, but the damage was done. That night, as I walked Claire to her car, I felt a strange chill that wasn't from the wind. I kissed her goodbye, watched her drive off, and stood there in the empty parking lot for a long moment, the city lights distant and cold. Then my phone buzzed. A message. From her. "You move on fast." I stared at the screen, the words burning brighter than the city skyline. I didn't reply. I couldn't, because for the first time since she'd left, I realized something that sent a ripple of unease through me. She hadn't needed time to find herself. She'd needed time to watch what happened when she wasn't there. And whatever she'd found, I had a feeling it wasn't over. The message burned on my phone screen long after I locked it. "You move on fast." Just 4 words. But they weighed more than anything she'd said the night she walked away. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't want to, but because anything I could have said would have sounded defensive or guilty. I wasn't either, but her words had a way of twisting inside me, turning certainty into self-doubt. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the evening. Her face, sitting there across the restaurant, the way her eyes didn't blink, the way she didn't smile. It was like she'd come there knowing exactly where I'd be. I told myself it was coincidence. The city wasn't small, but it wasn't huge either. People ran into each other. That's all it was, a coincidence. But even as I thought it, something deep in me refused to believe it. The next morning, I found myself scrolling through our old messages, not out of nostalgia, but out of a kind of emotional forensic instinct, searching for clues, for something I'd missed. Our last conversation before she left had been simple. Her, I just need to clear my head. Me, okay, take all the time you need. Her, thank you. You're being so understanding. Understanding. That word stung now. It made me wonder whether she'd chosen it because she knew I would be. I put the phone down, made coffee, and tried to start my day like nothing had happened. But by noon she texted again. Was she worth it? No greeting, no context. Just that. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, deleted, retyped. Finally, I settled on, "You're the one who ended it." I respected that. Her reply came almost instantly. Respect. Is that what you call it? Something about that line chilled me. There was a tone in it I didn't recognize, neither anger nor hurt, but something colder, like she was testing how far she could push before I cracked. I didn't respond. I told myself I wouldn't let her drag me back into whatever emotional labyrinth she was trying to build. But that night, I found myself checking my phone every hour, waiting for her next move. When none came, I almost felt disappointed. Claire called later that evening. "Hey," she said, her voice light. "I had a really nice time last night." Her timing was perfect. Her voice, her laughter, the warmth she carried with her so effortlessly. It felt like oxygen again. I let her talk about her day, about the chaos of her office, about the cat she was thinking of adopting. For a while, I forgot the text, the tension, the echo of my ex's eyes across the restaurant. We planned to see each other again Friday night. By Thursday, I started to feel like things might actually be okay. The city had that clean post-rain glow, and I decided to walk to work instead of driving. The sidewalks were slick. The air smelled faintly of wet asphalt and coffee. Halfway down the block, I saw her, my ex, standing under the awning of a bookstore across the street. She wasn't doing anything, just standing there watching the crowd. Watching me, I realized. For a second, I thought I was imagining it again. But when our eyes met, she smiled. Slow, deliberate, knowing. I froze mid-step, unsure what to do. People moved around me, the city humming in motion. But it felt like everything had narrowed to just her and me, a silent gravity between us. Then she turned, walked into the bookstore, and disappeared. I stayed frozen for a moment longer before crossing the street. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe, or something darker. The need for closure that had started to feel less like healing and more like obsession. Inside, the bookstore was quiet, warm, filled with the soft smell of paper and dust. I scanned the aisles, half expecting to see her browsing, pretending to be casual. But she wasn't there. When I reached the back, I stopped at a shelf filled with journals, the kind with leather covers and rough paper edges. One of them was open, like someone had been reading it and left it there. On the page was a quote, "Sometimes love ends not because it dies, but because it reveals." I don't know why, but that line felt like a message. I left the store without buying anything. That night, I couldn't focus on anything. I sat at my desk, staring at my computer, pretending to work, but my mind kept drifting back to that look on her face, that slow, knowing smile. Was she following me? Or was I just seeing what I wanted to see? Signs of her, echoes of her, everywhere I went. Friday arrived like a breath of relief. Claire met me downtown, outside a small Italian restaurant with string lights tangled across the windows. She looked radiant in the warm glow of the street lamps, her hair catching the light like gold. We ate, we laughed, we walked hand in hand through the park afterward. The city felt alive again, the way it used to before everything cracked. And then, just as we were leaving the park, my phone buzzed. A photo. No message, just an image. It was me and Claire, walking, laughing, taken from a distance. My stomach dropped. I showed her the screen. "Someone just sent this to me." Her brows furrowed. "Who?" I didn't answer, but I didn't have to. She saw the tension in my face, the way my hand tightened around the phone. "Your ex?" she asked quietly. I nodded. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The city noise around us faded, just the wind through the trees and the distant hum of traffic. "Maybe you should block her," Claire said softly. "If she's watching you like that, it's not healthy." "I know," I said. "I just didn't think she'd go this far." I blocked the number that night, or tried to, but part of me wondered if it would even matter, because the truth was, I could still feel her. Not in a supernatural sense, just in that quiet psychological way someone's presence lingers long after they've left. Over the next few days, things returned to something like normal. I saw Claire often, went back to work, met friends again. I laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in weeks, but the feeling never fully left. That subtle tension under the skin, the sense that I was being watched. Then, a week later, Lucas called. "Hey, man," he said, his tone uneasy. "I don't know if this means anything, but I saw her." "Who?" "Your ex, at the cafe near your office. She was sitting by the window, just staring out. But when I passed by, she looked right at me, like she knew I'd tell you." I sighed. "She probably just happened to be there." "Yeah, maybe," he said. "But she was wearing your hoodie." The silence between us stretched. The hoodie, a faded gray one she used to steal when she stayed over. I hadn't even realized it was missing. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out hollow. That night, I checked my apartment. The closet, the drawers, the bathroom cabinet. And that's when I noticed something strange. The picture frame on my desk, the one of us at the lake last summer, had been moved. Not much, just slightly tilted, like someone had picked it up and set it down again. I knew I hadn't touched it. For the first time in weeks, I locked every window. The next morning, there was a note slipped under my door. No envelope. No handwriting I recognized. Just 4 words, written neatly on a plain white page. "You didn't wait long." I sat there, staring at it, my pulse thudding in my ears. Then I grabbed my phone and called her number, the one I'd blocked. It went straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. That weekend, I went to stay with Lucas. I told him I just needed a change of scenery, but he could tell I was shaken. We spent hours talking, watching old movies, drinking too much beer. By Sunday, I almost felt normal again, until I got home. The note was gone. I hadn't touched it. I'd left it on the counter before leaving. But now, the counter was bare, and in its place was something else. A photo frame. It was the same picture from my desk, me and her, smiling by the lake. But this time, the glass was cracked clean through the middle. I remember sitting down slowly, my hands trembling just slightly. The apartment was silent again, that unbearable silence. And then, for the first time since she left, I spoke out loud, to no one. "What do you want from me?" No answer, of course. Just the faint hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock. But somewhere deep down I already knew the answer. She wanted me to feel what she'd felt. The confusion, the distance, the silence. She wanted to haunt me with my own understanding. And maybe, just maybe, she wanted me to understand that she hadn't lost control. She'd simply changed the rules. It's strange how quickly fear becomes routine. By the 3rd week, I stopped checking over my shoulder when I walked home at night. I stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed. I told myself that what had happened, the photo, the note, the cracked frame, were just coincidences stacked on top of each other. Life has a way of building patterns from chaos when you're looking for meaning. That's what I told myself, but I still couldn't sleep. Claire started noticing the tension. She'd ask what was wrong, and I'd tell her work was stressful, or I was just tired. I didn't want to bring her into it, into her. My ex had already crept too far into the quiet corners of my life. I didn't want her shadow reaching Claire too. One evening, Claire came over after work. I'd cleaned the apartment, every trace of my ex long gone now, or so I thought. We were cooking together, some half-hearted attempt at pasta, when Claire walked over to the bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines. "Is this her?" she asked. I turned. She was holding a photo I'd forgotten to take down, a small one tucked between 2 books, from a trip to the mountains. My ex was standing in front of a cabin, bundled in a scarf, and then laughing at something out of frame. "Yeah," I said quietly. Claire looked at it for a long time. "She's beautiful," she said finally, and placed it face down on the shelf. There was no accusation in her tone, just quiet understanding. But it unsettled me anyway, that moment of overlap between the life I'd lost and the one I was trying to build. Later that night, when Claire had fallen asleep beside me, I got up to get some water. The city outside was quiet, the kind of stillness that only happens between midnight and dawn. I opened the fridge, drank straight from the bottle, and stood there, the cold air brushing my face. Then I heard it, a soft creak from the hallway. I froze. It wasn't the kind of sound apartments make when they settle. It was distinct, human. Slow footsteps, deliberate, stopping just before the bedroom door. I set the bottle down quietly and grabbed the closest thing I could find, a small wrench from the kitchen drawer. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear. I stepped into the hallway. Nothing. The door was locked, the lights dim, the silence absolute. But when I turned back toward the kitchen, I saw something that made my stomach twist. The photo on the shelf, the one Claire had placed face down, was standing upright again. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning, I told myself it was stress, exhaustion, imagination. I'd been working too much, sleeping too little, but part of me knew that wasn't true. That night, I installed a small camera near the front door. Not paranoia, just precaution. That's what I told myself. For 2 days, nothing happened. Then on the third, I woke up to a notification. Motion detected. I opened the footage. It was dark, grainy, the timestamp flashing 3 to 14 a.m. The frame showed my apartment door, motionless for a few seconds. Then, a shadow. Someone standing just out of the light, close enough that their outline was visible, but not their face. They didn't knock, didn't move, just stood there, watching. Then they leaned in, and for a split second, the light caught their face. Her. My ex. She looked straight into the camera, not startled, not ashamed, just calm, like she wanted me to see her. And then she was gone. I must have watched that footage 20 times. Every detail burned into my brain. The angle of her shoulders, the slow blink, the faint curve of her mouth before she turned away. I sent the clip to Lucas. "Dude, that's insane," he said after watching it. "You should call the cops." "And say what? That my ex-fiancée stood outside my apartment for 30 seconds? "Yeah," he said, incredulous. "That's exactly what you should say." But I didn't. I couldn't, because a part of me still didn't understand why. Why she'd do it. Why now? Why the silence between us had turned into this quiet war. Instead, I texted her again. "I saw you." No reply. The next day, she blocked me. It was almost a relief, like the game had ended. But it hadn't. That weekend, Claire and I went out of town. She'd planned a small getaway, a cabin by the lake, some time away from the noise. I agreed, hoping distance might finally break whatever strange tether still bound me to my ex. The cabin was beautiful. Wooden beams, large windows overlooking the water, pine trees whispering in the wind. Claire unpacked while I started a fire. For a while, it felt peaceful. Then, as I was stacking the logs, I saw something carved into the mantel. A heart. And inside it, 2 initials, H+M. Her initials, and mine. I froze, staring at it. Claire noticed my expression. "What is it?" "Nothing," I said quickly. "Just something familiar." But inside, panic twisted like a knife. We'd been here before. This was the same cabin from that photo, the one my ex and I had stayed in last winter. I hadn't realized Claire had booked that cabin. I hadn't even recognized the listing when she'd shown it to me. The air suddenly felt colder. I tried to act normal that night, cooking dinner, talking about work, pretending to laugh at her stories, but my eyes kept flicking to the window, to the black reflection of the trees outside. Every sound of wind or branch against glass made my skin crawl. Later, when Claire went to shower, I walked outside. The lake was perfectly still, a mirror of the night sky. I stood there, breath clouding in the cold, staring at my reflection on the water's surface. Then, faintly behind me, a light flickered in the woods. I turned. A small, distant glow, like a phone screen. I stepped toward it, my boots crunching on the frozen ground. But before I could get close, it vanished. When I went back inside, Claire was sitting by the fire, brushing her hair. She looked up and smiled, but something in her eyes shifted when she saw my expression. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I lied. "Just thought I saw something." That night I barely slept. Every creak of the cabin felt amplified, every whisper of wind like a breath against my ear. At one point I got up to check the door. It was locked. But when I turned toward the window, I froze. A single handprint was pressed against the glass, small, delicate, but fresh. The next morning, Claire noticed it too. "Maybe it was yours," she said, but we both knew it wasn't. We left early. When we got back to the city, I checked the footage from my apartment camera again, half expecting something new. But this time there was nothing, just silence. Until that night. I came home from work to find a small package at my door. No return address, no note, just my name, written in neat handwriting. Inside was a box, and inside that box, a ring. Her ring, the engagement ring I'd given her, except the diamond was missing. I sat down hard on the floor, the box trembling in my hands. My phone buzzed again, a new message. a number I didn't recognize. Do you still understand me? For a long time, I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then I typed back, hands shaking. What do you want? A pause, then another message. You said I could take all the time I needed. I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering. You left. You ended it. Another pause. I never left. You did. The words hit like a blow, because deep down I knew what she meant. She'd been gone long before she said the words. I just hadn't seen it. And now I realized something worse. She hadn't moved on. She'd stayed exactly where I left her, only now she was dragging me back there too. That night I packed a small bag and left the apartment. I told Lucas I needed a place to crash for a few days. I didn't explain why. He didn't ask. When I got to his place, he was sitting on the couch watching TV. I dropped my bag, sat beside him, tried to act casual, but I could tell he noticed the tension. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said. Maybe I have, I muttered. He frowned, but didn't press. Later that night, as I lay on his couch, staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed one last time. No message, just a photo. It was me, sleeping on Lucas's couch. I didn't sleep that night. The photo stayed on my screen, every pixel crawling under my skin. The dim light from Lucas's living room, my body turned slightly on the couch, the blanket half fallen to the floor. I was asleep, unaware, and whoever took it had been close, too close. I sat up slowly, the air thick, the sound of the refrigerator's hum suddenly too loud. Lucas was asleep in his room, his door half open, faint light spilling into the hallway. I didn't want to wake him, didn't want to explain what I couldn't explain. I checked the timestamp, 2:47 a.m. I looked around the room, the windows, the back door, the narrow line of darkness under the curtains. Every shadow felt aware of me, watching back. I turned my phone over, face down on the table, and just sat there, breathing. When morning came, the world outside looked completely ordinary, as if nothing had shifted in the night. Lucas made coffee, poured 2 mugs, asked me if I was okay. I lied, of course. Said I'd been dreaming, that I needed to go to my office early. Anything to leave the question hanging in the air. The walk to work felt longer than usual. The city was waking up. Commuters, horns, distant conversations. Life moving forward, while I felt suspended somewhere between what was real and what wasn't. By the time I reached the office, I decided to do something I hadn't done before. I'd find her. Not to accuse or demand or beg, just to understand. I still had the address of her apartment. I hadn't been there since the breakup, but I remembered every detail. The ivy creeping up the bricks, the narrow stairway that always smelled faintly of old wood and lavender. I stood across the street, staring up at her window. The curtains were drawn. There was no light inside. For a moment I thought she might have moved out, but when I crossed the street and buzzed her intercom, a familiar voice answered. Hello? I froze. Hey, I said carefully. It's me. There was a pause, then a soft laugh. You shouldn't be here. I know, I said. I need to talk. Another pause, then the door clicked open. Inside, everything was the same. The faint scent of her perfume, the minimalist furniture, the plants she used to name like they were pets. The only difference was the atmosphere. It felt colder now. She appeared in the hallway, barefoot, wearing a loose sweater, her hair tied up. She looked exactly the same, and nothing like the person I'd known. You've been following me, I said. She tilted her head, amused. That's what you think. You sent me photos, notes, the ring. Her expression didn't change. Maybe I wanted to remind you. Of what? That people don't just disappear when you decide you're done with them. I took a breath. You were the one who left. I asked for time, she said. You gave me space, and then filled it with someone else. Her tone wasn't angry. It was measured, almost tender, and that made it worse. You were watching me, I said quietly. I was, noticing you. She replied. You seemed happy, happier even. I wondered if that was what you wanted, or just what you thought you deserved. The words landed like stones. Is this about punishment? I asked. Because if it is, she shook her head. No, it's about truth. Truth. That sometimes we love people for who we need them to be, not who they are. And when they stop being that, we can't forgive them for it. For a second, I couldn't breathe, because deep down, I knew she wasn't wrong. There had been moments, quiet ones, late at night, when I'd loved her most for how she made me feel, not for who she was. But this wasn't truth. This was manipulation dressed as philosophy. I stepped closer. You can't just play with people like this. You can't haunt me. Her lips curved. You say that like you haven't been doing the same thing to yourself. What are you talking about? She moved to the window, drew back the curtain slightly. Sunlight spilled across her face, and for a fleeting moment I saw the person I'd once asked to marry me, the one who used to leave notes on the fridge and whisper plans about a future we'd never reach. I never sent you those photos, she said. I stared. What? I never sent you anything. Then who? She looked back at me, her expression unreadable. Maybe you should ask yourself that. The silence between us was sharp enough to cut. I left without another word. The city felt distorted when I stepped outside, like every sound was slightly off tempo, every movement delayed by half a second. I walked aimlessly for hours, trying to make sense of what she'd said. If she hadn't sent them, then who had? By the time I reached my office, I'd gone through every possibility, a friend, a stranger, some twisted coincidence. But none of it made sense. No one else would care enough to do it. That night, I went back through the messages, every text, every photo, every timestamp, and then I noticed something I hadn't before. The first photo, the one from the restaurant, had been sent minutes after I posted a picture from that same night on social media. Same clothes, same setting. The second, the photo of me and Claire walking, had been taken from the same side of the street I always walked home from. The last one, me sleeping on Lucas's couch, came from an angle that matched the corner camera in his living room, which meant whoever sent them had access. My hands went cold. I called Lucas. He didn't answer. I tried again. Still nothing. The third time he picked up, groggy. "What's going on, man? I need to ask you something." I said, "Has anyone been in your place recently?" "Not that I know of." "Why?" I hesitated. "The photo, the one of me sleeping, it was taken inside your apartment." There was silence on the other end. Then, slowly, "That's not possible." "I'm telling you." I said, "That's not possible," he snapped. Then, softer, "Listen, maybe you're just tired. Maybe you're seeing things that aren't there." The tone in his voice sent a chill through me. Not because it was harsh, but because it sounded too careful. After we hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Later that night, I drove to his place. His car was parked outside, lights off. I sat there for a while, engine idling, staring at his window. Then I saw movement, a figure crossing the room, a flash of blonde hair. Claire. My stomach dropped. She was there, in his apartment. I didn't move, didn't knock, just sat there, realization spreading through me like ice. Claire and Lucas. It all clicked too fast. The weekend he'd insisted I stay over, the missing hours, the way he'd avoided my eyes every time I brought her up. I'd been so caught up in the ghost of my ex that I'd missed the betrayal breathing right beside me. When I finally drove home, the city lights blurred into streaks. I felt hollow, not angry, not even heartbroken, just empty. Inside, the apartment was silent again. The air still carried traces of Claire's perfume. On the counter sat the box with the ring, open, the missing diamond catching the faint glow from the streetlight outside. And then I saw it, taped to the bottom of the box, folded small. A note. "You understand now." No signature, just that. I sank onto the floor, the words echoing in my head. She hadn't wanted revenge. She'd wanted revelation. To pull back the curtain and make me see what I'd refused to. All this time, I'd been afraid of what she might do, but the truth was, she didn't need to do anything. All she had to do was wait for me to see myself, to see what I'd built my life on. The lies, the deflection, the illusion of control. I thought I was the one being haunted, but maybe I was the haunting, the echo of choices I'd never faced. I sat there until morning, the city slowly brightening outside. When the first light touched the cracked glass of the photo frame on my desk, I finally understood the message hidden beneath it all. She hadn't wanted to destroy me. She'd wanted me to listen, to hear the sound of silence I'd left behind, and recognize that it belonged to both of us. And in that quiet, I realized something that would stay with me long after everything else faded. Some people leave to find themselves. Others leave so that you'll finally have to find yourself too. Morning bled through the blinds like a reluctant truth. The kind that doesn't ask to be seen. It just is. Cold light pooled across the floorboards, catching the edges of the note that still sat beside the open ring box. "You understand now." I stared at it until the words blurred. Maybe I did understand. Or maybe I only understood that there was no going back, not to the person I was before, not to the version of her I had held on to. The silence between us had spoken louder than any confrontation could have. I didn't hear from her again. Not that week, not the next. It was as if she'd walked out of the city, out of my life, and out of whatever reality we'd built together. No final message, no closure, just that lingering echo of unfinished sentences. The days after felt strangely weightless, like everything I did was slightly disconnected from the world. I went to work, sat in meetings, smiled when people spoke to me, but none of it landed. The moments passed through me, not with me. Claire called once. I let it ring. I didn't have the strength to hear her voice, to listen to the soft apology that would follow, or the explanation that would never really explain anything. Some things, I realized, aren't meant to be repaired. They're meant to dissolve, leaving behind the outline of who we were when we still believed in forever. I packed up the apartment a week later. The drawers, the shelves, the closets, all of it became a slow excavation of the life we'd shared. I found one of her old sweaters tucked behind the couch, still carrying that faint, familiar scent. I folded it neatly and placed it in a box I'd never open again. The ring, though, I couldn't put it away. I left it on the counter for days, watching how the light caught the missing diamond. That empty space in the metal, it mirrored everything. A reminder that absence, too, has shape. Lucas stopped by once, unannounced. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, hands shoved into his pockets, his usual charm gone. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. Eventually. He hesitated. "I didn't mean for—" "I know," I said, cutting him off. "You didn't have to mean it for it to hurt." He looked down, nodded once, and left. I never saw him again after that. Not in person, at least. I heard he moved to another city, started over, like people do when they're trying to outrun themselves. As for her, sometimes I thought I saw her. In the corner of a crowded cafe, walking past me in the reflection of a store window, standing across the street beneath the harsh glow of a street lamp. Maybe it was her. Maybe it wasn't. But in those moments, I'd catch that same calm in my chest, the kind that came when you finally stopped asking why and started living with what was. I moved into a smaller place, fewer windows, fewer memories. I didn't hang photos anymore, didn't keep mementos. I started running in the mornings, not because I enjoyed it, but because it gave me an illusion of moving forward. The city looked different at dawn, gentler, almost forgiving. There were days when I felt normal again. I'd walk past the bakery we used to visit, and instead of pain, I'd just feel distance, like it had all happened to someone else in another life. But then there were nights when the quiet came back, uninvited, and I'd find myself replaying everything, the laughter, the betrayal, the half-answers. That was the thing about loss. It didn't leave, it just changed its shape. One night, months later, I got a letter in the mail, no return address, just my name, written in her handwriting, delicate, deliberate. My chest tightened as I opened it. Inside was a single photograph, black and white. It was me, standing in front of that same cafe, hands in my pockets, looking across the street. I didn't remember when it was taken, but there I was, caught in a moment I didn't know had been witnessed. On the back, in small handwriting, she'd written, "You looked peaceful. No signature, no date, just that." I held it for a long time. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd spent months haunting me with photos meant to unsettle, to provoke, to reveal. And now, in this final one, she'd captured something different. Not fear, not guilt, just stillness. I slipped the photograph into a drawer and didn't look at it again. But some nights, when I passed that cafe, I'd catch myself pausing, half expecting to see her sitting by the window, half hoping she wasn't. Time doesn't heal. Not really. It just changes the story you tell yourself. I started writing again. Not letters, not apologies. Just words, fragments, things I wished I'd said, and things I hoped to forget. I filled pages I never reread. Somewhere in that mess of ink and memory, I realized that forgiveness isn't about absolution. It's about letting the silence speak without trying to fill it. A year later, I saw her name in a gallery listing downtown, a small exhibition, Found Moments. Curiosity pulled me there before I could talk myself out of it. The space was quiet, minimalist, the walls lined with black and white photographs, people caught mid-motion, unaware they were being seen. A woman staring out a bus window, a couple laughing in a laundromat, a man asleep on a couch. My breath caught. It was the same photo, me, on Lucas's couch, the blanket half fallen, the one that had started it all. Only now, under the gallery lights, it looked different, softer, intimate even. Beside it, a small plaque read, "Sometimes the distance between love and loss is just a shutter's click." I stood there for a long time. She was somewhere in that crowd. I could feel it, but I didn't look for her. Didn't need to, because in that moment I understood what all of it had been. Not revenge, not cruelty. It had been her way of holding on, of transforming pain into art, into permanence. When I finally stepped outside, the evening air felt lighter. I didn't look back. The city hummed quietly around me, alive, indifferent, infinite. For the first time in a long while, I felt something close to peace. Not because I had answers, but because I'd stopped needing them. She had found herself. And, in the strangest way, so had I. Have you ever realized too late that someone's silence was their final truth? That their absence said what words never could? When trust breaks, do we seek closure, or do we secretly hope the mystery lingers so we can keep feeling connected to what we lost? And if love, at its deepest, becomes art, is it ever truly gone, or does it just change form, waiting for us to recognize ourselves in it one last time?